Who's up? Mr. Papa John, would you want to either you could stand at the microphone or sit for that microphone, so we can get it. This is being live streamed or recorded, I guess. Recorded.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
It could take a long time talking about the history of this place, but I want to keep it as short as possible. But I want you to also understand the background of what we're trying to do, and that's why you need some of the background as to what we've done since our family first came here in 1938. I was 5 years old, moved down where I was born, Philadelphia. My dad had a restaurant there, and small place, right next to Parkside Avenue, Forest and Girard, if you know Philadelphia. Pardon me, I have allergies, pollen. Anyway, make a very long story as short as possible. My dad and my mother's two brothers, Chris Trajos and James Trajos, who had a restaurant in Alexandria, Virginia, on King Street, just off the George Washington Parkway that goes through Alexandria. We used to go visit them over there in the 40s. It took 5 hours to get there because they had a ferry over Chesapeake Bay. You had to drive through Annapolis to the old Defense Highway, parallels Route 50 now. It went through Peace Cross, down Route 1 and Rhode Island Avenue in D.C., across the Potomac River, and in 42 they were building National Airport and all that. I remember that as a little kid. So in any event, they bought the property in 1938. I don't know if I'd have had the courage to do what they did. It was in its third bankruptcy. It was the middle of the Depression. The Roosevelt administration was trying to push things, as you know, economically, and they seemed to work for a while, but after a while, the economists would tell you it was beginning to fade out. And it was only the defense industry growing because of World War II that they were able to come out from under, I think. So in World War II, I was 9, 10, 11 years old, working there at the hotel. And the reason why I emphasize this is it was an entire family thing. My mother worked the cash register in the bar on the boardwalk during the day, then cooked at night. I was a bellhop, dishwasher, second cook, and all that because we had a dining room that seated about 80 people. The rooms in the hotel went up to almost 100 then. The four-story building had a lot of rooms in it. If you look at the picture, you'll see it in the back. It rose to almost 5 stories because the first level, you went up about 5 steps to go in the first level. And then by the time you figured the roof and the cornices and getting up there, it was almost, I don't know, I never measured it, but it was over 4 stories. It was near 5 stories. In any event, that was all a frame building, German siding, all kinds of wood that had to be painted. It was unbelievable. The gallons of paint we had to sling on that place, and seagulls hovering over you, say, "Don't you unload?" While I'm here. Anyway, the whole family worked during that time. Dad was down there full time. The two, my mother's brothers, were over in Alexandria, Virginia, but they were still 25% apiece owners. Then in 42, the Carlton came up for sale. It was a bidding auction. I don't know whether it had been in bankruptcy or what. I don't remember as a little boy. But they bought that. So the family, including my two uncles, owned the Carlton and the Bellhaven property, which went all the way down to where my cousin Gus's place is on Wilmington Avenue, all the way up the boardwalk, 200 feet, and down the avenue. Not as far as it is now, and I'll explain that. So, then in 1947, they decided to split the property. And my two uncles wound up with the plan was to get it split where the income was half and half. So they drew lots out of a hat, and our family, Papa John's, wound up with the center portion, but my two uncles wound up with half of the boardwalk from Grotto Pizza all the way down to Wilmington Avenue, and they wound up with a Carlton. So that's how that happened. Now, during that time, and this is one of the things I want to emphasize, because we're going to present a somewhat different approach, I believe, than what this original plan shows for 121 rooms and so forth. Because when that was put in there, as I understand it, and I can be corrected by the architect, that we can put in as many units above as long as we meet the height and FAR and all that, as long as we have the parking spaces for it. And so it came out that with plenty of space underneath, there are 121 parking spaces, plus the ones on the street level for unloading luggage and all. So that's the way the architect said, well, okay, we can put in 121 rooms, and it was designed that way. Now, from an economic standpoint, that's very feasible, okay, especially for the heavy season, which we consider the summer months, not the shoulder season so much. But when we saw that, Alex and I decided that, you know, we want this place because of its location. I've always referred to it as the Rock of Gibraltar. You know, you can't enter the Mediterranean from the Atlantic unless you go past the rock. And you're either going to walk by Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk, or you're going to drive by it. And there's all these events down there. So that corner is obviously, from an economic standpoint, highly desirable to a lot of people. Now, we used to, and this is why we decided we might want to drop back the number of motel units if we could get some sort of slight variances, not big important ones, not on the heights and all that. But we wanted to put out and present an architectural plan that more closely, as much as possible, based on modern day construction methods and materials, represents what the Bellhaven represented for years. We used to go out and put in these vertical flags that have the stars at the top, triangular down the pillars. You'll notice this front area near the boardwalk had an overhang. I call it an overhang, but it's supported by posts right out to the curb. And people could unload their luggage and come in, and that's where we would put the flags out. We'd put them out on stanchions off the porches here. We would invite the commissioners. We would invite all kinds of people that were in charitable clubs and all to sit on the porch to watch parades or what was going on. And that's what we would like to do now as much as possible. But in order to do that, we have to be able to put out something out there that more emulates the roof coverage, the old Bellhaven Hotel. And if we do that and spend the extra money to do that, and if we lower the number of rooms that we're going to do it in, then number one, we can keep it so that it makes sense from an economic standpoint, but also we can have something that the city can be proud of and utilize as a almost, not quite, semi-public space so that we can invite people up there like we did in the past to watch things under the gazebo, to watch the 4th of July, etc. So, in any event, what I wanted to emphasize most is that this goes back to 1938 all the way up till the present day. And we haven't done anything there because we thought, well, we can wait. There's no rush. But what has happened is the economics in Rehoboth have dictated to us to a certain extent. You've got an opportunity cost from an economic standpoint. You've got all this air up there, and you're not getting $1 out of it, nothing. So you've got to build something there someday, whether it's done today or 10 years from now, or if it's been done 10 years ago. So now is the time to do it, we believe, because there's a demand for more parking space. This is not, we believe, going to increase the traffic anymore because people are going to come in town. They won't be riding around looking for a spot with all the delivery trucks and everything else in the way. They're just going to come in, pull in their parking space, and if they need to go to restaurants or whatever they want to do, they're going to do a lot of walking. I believe, because most of the things are within walking distance they're going to want to do as touristas. So that's where we are. Alex, my son, has been involved in putting on wine expositions in Richmond, and he moved here 2 years ago. And he kept asking me for about 8 or 10 years, Dad, when are we going to do it? I say, not yet, Alex. So finally, about a year ago, I said, okay, not yet is over. Let's try and do something. So that's why we're here.
I don't want to steal too much of Peter's thunder, but what we want to do is
What do you want to
a
take
modern
Saturday off?
adaptation of the original Bellhaven Hotel that offers a great customer experience.
Busy day.
And as you'll see
Good.
in Peter's
Make your phone call
presentation,
to First
we've
State
actually
Seven.
already made
Yeah,
modifications to
we're
the
doing
original
it
sketch
Monday
plan
at
submission
10.
that you
And
received.
Tanya was- okay.
And one of the major modifications is we
They
have
believe the
dialed
file
back
stuff was
the
messed up.
density, so we actually have fewer rooms. But again, I don't want to
It's just
steal
Who's doing it
Peter's
Monday?
thunder. So Peter, do you want to take it away? And
And I think Rob's gonna
By the way,
Okay.
since this is
and actually Dave said he makes
just
that.
a thought comes to mind.
It's just midnight now.
I'm sure, I would hope that
Is
everyone
that a
who
regional?
drawings is
or-
numbered.
That's
And then
regional,
as you
that's
supply
Chris Hodges.
new material,
I called him
us or tell
immediately, it's
Ann
not like I'm a tattletale, but
If it
it's just,
supersedes
it's a
previous
thing,
material,
like at this
Yeah.
point,
we keep a
really.
running record of material
Um,
and
you know what I
permission
mean?
and
Yep.
others that
I had to
review
keep
this
him
need
in
to
the
know
loop because
what is
Chris was gonna
obsolete,
hear about it.
Oh,
probably.
so yeah, oh,
what
absolutely.
has changed. Because we can't keep, the thought just came to me. So hopefully you will do that as it progresses.
Gun the number system, that's not usually a schedule for the numbers. We will number what we have, we'll pre-number the second set, and we'll keep numbers all the way through.
Okay, and then
If
as,
we're drawing and say, I'm drawing number 53, we know which drawing we're talking about.
yeah, and as you submit something, if it replaces something that went before it, if the thing is obsolete, you need to let Ann know so that, because we don't destroy them, mark them as obsolete, and then we see them.
So what I'll do is I'll make a copy of what we reviewed today, and then resubmit it numbered. I'll number the first set.
Okay, thank you.
We have additional information. So, as you can imagine, I'm like the luckiest architect.
Yeah.
Right? I honestly feel that way. I'm a
We'll see
Dover
what
boy.
happens after.
I went to
After
Dover. And I moved out of
Give me the
Dover
call
to
before
practice
the-
architecture in Baltimore and Washington D.C.
Uh,
You never know.
And I've
No, you
watched
really
my
don't know.
hometown grow.
feel bad putting in the reduced rates, but it's like,
Dave
I'm sure Dave enjoyed every minute of that.
Dave called me and said,
I
what's,
do
what do you got?
specialize in
Do?
hotels.
What the hell is Sean doing?
I,
My first
Drops on
hotel
the
was.
rates.
Because at this point, he knew that Sean knows what rates we're supposed to be in. It's like,
I said, trying to
And
keep the money,
that was
Dave,
my
trying to
first
keep the
insight.
money.
So I started my own practice in
he's okay.
1992.
he's been all right.
And,
Okay,
Yeah, we just wanted to know why.
right.
People in Baltimore, 12 people.
I expected a call. I really did.
And,
He knows to
so,
call me usually
when I got a
first.
call from
Did you approve
Alex
this? I said, I did.
John
Right.
and
And then he stands down.
Mhm.
about this opportunity, I couldn't.
I did. I didn't like it, but I did.
But I did it.
Because I
Fair
grew
enough.
up in.
Yeah.
Consider,
We'll
like,
see.
I started coming.
It'd be a pain in the ass if we have to reduce the rate on everything that Hunter does.
But
Yeah, I
the
don't know, either
Bellhaven
that or
Inn
Craig
is-
can give him some free spots someplace to
So
figure it out. But that's on Craig.
Right.
Craig's gonna make that call.
Right. I get that. Obviously, I wasn't gonna make that call.
Me neither.
When it got to the point where I'm trying to crunch the numbers and get the cost per point, I'm like, I told you, I'm like, Frank, there's, the only way I can get farther down is by giving him free spots.
This image
Mhm.
up here
And he's like, yeah,
is
well,
the
don't
image.
do that.
It's one of the two really good
We'll see what
postcard images
happens
of the
on Monday.
Bellhaven. And
That will be a peaceful weekend
first
anyway.
meeting I
Yeah.
had,
Poor Craig's gonna come right out of the frying
John,
pan into the
I
fire.
talked about
Coming
painting
back.
shutters. So
I'm sure he was busy at
and how
NED
he
all
wants
week
to
too.
make a
Yeah, he was
bulletproof
sitting there with
building,
Molly all
something
week.
that really weathers
Oh,
well.
really?
Imagine going
He's
with your
committed
boss
to
to
building a building,
a place for a whole week.
and
So I heard your boss is a real
I
asshole.
think you and I would actually
it's a
have
very
fun.
special place.
That may be a poor example.
Yeah, it might be.
The meeting today is really about
But I know what you mean. And
proposal that
again,
we've put out on the table that we
Yeah.
think follows all
I mean,
the
I've only spent a few minutes with Molly, but she seems alright, but again,
Or is
Yeah,
there
but
a
she-
place to bend
Tom
rules
always
more
kept the
because of the special nature of
50,000
this
mile
location
view.
or not?
yeah,
He kind of
And
scanned
so,
over it
and
in
we're
general.
open-minded,
Yeah.
so we
Hey, is
really
this
kind
going
of
on?
from
Is this
here,
going on?
this
Oh,
will
we're
work for
good.
you.
See you later.
Hopefully you'll wanna work
Molly's
with us
not.
and
Molly's like,
okay.
what are you
So this
doing
was,
tomorrow
the
at
first
3 o'clock in the afternoon?
that we
You know,
found,
I
and
mean,
was
she
like,
wants to
wow, this
know
really could
Really?
work this
who,
place.
what, where,
And
when,
just so
how,
you
why.
understand what is
And
happening
Craig's a lot
here,
used to that.
um,
And I wouldn't be
this
either.
building
You know,
here
either
is
you
still
hire me
right.
to do a job or you don't hire
Sure,
me to
yeah,
do a job.
yeah,
that
no,
one there.
that's,
One of these
and,
two is still there.
that's right.
This is the
yeah.
end of our site.
And
Like
she
you
makes
said.
this, she'll make
All
these
the way to the
statements like,
corner.
with us here.
That old tall building was
We
part
should
of
have been
the
able to
site.
order the
And I
furniture
think
before we
these
closed
three
on our
buildings in
DD.
the back,
Sure.
those are
And
actually on
it
our
made- it
parcel.
got this place
That's on
done.
Face Wilmington
If
Avenue.
Tom had been involved,
So,
Tom would order the furniture, this would have been
another
done
really nice
January
image
1st, and you guys would have walked into the
of
office.
the
Really?
property from
Yeah,
the
oh, yeah.
boardwalk.
Tom would have said,
And
screw the lawyers.
here you see.
She was the opposite, was like, not until that ink's dry do we do anything.
Green roofs, the white.
And Craig's like, but then you're screwing me on, you know,
Everything
New
else.
Year's Day and everything else. And
Sure.
these people are gonna be sitting without desks for well, it turned out being 10 to 12.
2.5 months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're screwing me because these people are gonna be without desks for 6 weeks.
But it's,
She
you
didn't
know,
care.
winter, and then here, this is
See,
what
Tom's
happened in
just, yeah, was just the opposite. Tom's like,
Right.
screw the lawyers.
Shit needs to be taken care of, let's do it.
He would have been boom, 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 done.
Right.
That's the way he was.
Right, the lawyer stuff is
And
gonna
it was
happen.
easier to deal with people like that than it is.
Um,
And Molly's nice,
So,
don't get me wrong,
you
she's
know,
not,
one-
but she's
one-
just,
one
Again,
sense of
Craig worked for,
inspiration is the
Draper
old building.
for
Another
for
sense
Tom,
of
that is, for
inspiration
how
is
long?
yeah,
sort of
10,
what
10
could
years.
be
10,
something really special.
So I mean,
and
it's
modern
just
and still
different.
look like the rest. So, you know, I hate to
You've
use,
been working
you know,
with somebody who,
these
like I
images
said,
are really good.
managed
They-
from the
they give a sense of
50,000
character.
view.
They
Now
give
you
a
got
sense
somebody
of,
who's
Oh,
right
yeah.
there, yeah.
scale and quality.
Even though
And I
she's
think that
not
our
physically on
that
yet.
Papa
Yeah.
John's
I know, she's not
are
even
really
being
interested
mean,
in
she just,
creating
this is what I want
a
done, this is
true
how I want it done,
quality
this is
piece
when I want it
of
done.
architecture. And
Just
you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
we've lived with at
Different
least
can
I've
be
lived
good or
with my
bad.
whole life, a one-story,
Oh,
not so
Yeah, sometimes.
dynamic retail box that sells fantastic candy kitchen and grottos and the ice cream. You know, my kids grew up picking ice cream flavors. You know, so all that stuff is good and fantastic, but it's a kind of an underdeveloped use. And to find out that it actually was something much more special in the past is awesome. It's not we're going to not necessarily not replace. We're going to bring those tenants back. It's not like that character of that flavor of tenants will go away, but the architecture of it will be changed. And so the question is, you know, what do we want to create here? And I mean we, as in like not just us, but we, because this is Rehoboth. This isn't just, you know, it's a really big opportunity. It's the corner of Main and Main. So we showed these images to the Papa John's, and they were very excited about it. The thing that these buildings have is they have huge amounts of their size. The size is much bigger. Our parcel is small, but for Rehoboth standards, it's pretty big. You know, we couldn't build 1,000 rooms, and in learning about the code, we really are limited primarily by, unfortunately, the old parking. You know, so it works out to be a 1-to-1 is kind of the key to how many rooms we can really build, and the FAR. Okay, so this drawing here shows the site, and it is the pink space there. So just so you understand, this is Rehoboth Avenue here, all the way down. This is the beach, boardwalk, and they own the corner of Rehoboth and the boardwalk. They zigzag around this corner parcel here, which is the corner of the boardwalk in Wilmington. But then they own the next series of houses that are actually little separate apartment buildings along Wilmington Avenue. And the two sides of the street are actually connected. So altogether, we have about 38,000 square feet of space, okay? With an FAR of 2 allows us to build about 76,000 square feet. Did I do that math right? Okay, so we're gonna roughly talk, please don't dive me into this. Okay, so that's kind of the rules that we're playing with, and so that's the site location. Okay? Next slide. This is the actual survey of the site. which was part of the requirement to have in the submission parcel. This lower portion here, that's Rehoboth Avenue. Those are the diagonal spaces of Rehoboth Avenue there. Boardwalk along this edge here. And then you can see this is 100% occupied by a one-story retail building. This is also 100% occupied by, I think it's a 2 or 3 story building. And then the three buildings in the back, there's a yard in between. And so that is our site, okay? And it is big enough, okay? It's awesome. So I'm sorry about flipping you upside down and around on this orientation here. Now Rehoboth Avenue is on the top of the page, and the Boardwalk is on the right, and Wilmington Avenue is on the bottom. This is a roof plan of the building, okay? So the green represents a green roof that could be a shingle
Yep.
roof.
I had a
It's not
biopsy
metal roof.
done the other day
That we would like
on my
to do that.
leg, and it was came back cancer.
My brother just had the same thing done to his face.
I'm not sure a standing seam
Yeah, he
metal
had 2
roof is the
spots on
right
his
thing to
face.
do.
He had both of them taken
The
off.
old building had
Yeah,
a
and they
What I understand.
wanted me to get it taken off, you know, pretty soon, and they're scheduled to like
But we
remove it
did
on the
design
24th
the
for like
building
a
so
minor
it has
surgery.
this
I
kind
can
of
still
pavilion
come to
here
work on the
at corners,
25th, but
and
I'm
it'd
just
be
gonna have the
one
elevator.
here,
ride.
one here.
But I just-
So you go put your leg up on the desk?
Entrance to the building.
Don't you sit like that
It's
anyhow?
here off of Wilmington Avenue.
But I just
That's what
wanted
Sean said. Sean
Give you
said
a
very
little-
distracting because you got your leg up on the
a
desk.
little
The
head.
balance of this is all.
A
Yeah,
little
I
head.
mean,
Sometimes
So,
Just kick back. I
this
mean,
plan
God, you take off, you work part time, and the rest of the time you got your feet kicked up, taking it easy.
We may or may not do that. The current plans, we've taken it out. So we'll talk about that.
Hmm.
But this
God.
this green edge all along this space here.
I don't know how you
That is
managed to
the
survive
second
this
level.
long, Heather.
Okay, and that is kind of the part of the plan that doesn't does not conform with the FAR. Technically, because it's covered, it should be included in the FAR.
Where do you?
Not included in the FAR.
Tell them to open up that crusty
We'll
wallet.
have to lose 10,000 square feet. That's our big bugaboo here. And we'll talk about more of that, right? This is the basement level, shows the parking. There's about 110 spaces in the underground. It's only parking. There's stairs and the elevators that take you up to the elevator at the hotel lobby. The parking entrance is here off of Wilmington Avenue, and the rest of it is all underground. Okay? This is the ground floor of the building. Again, we'll start at the bottom here. This is Wilmington Avenue. That's the porte cochere. The drop-off would be here. There's a few parking spaces adjacent to the porte cochere, and then there's a few parking spaces undercover over here next to the service lot. So there's about 10 spaces. So that's how we get to 120. So we have 110 in the basement and approximately 10 on the ground level. Okay, so this would be the handicap location. The handicap van would be here as well. Right? The hotel lobby is obviously right off of the porte cochere. This yellow block here is showing the hotel lobby. The front desk, etc., is off to the left. And you go straight through. There's a what we call a focal point bar, and the restaurant for the hotel will be in this location. And the kitchen, etc., is this pink stuff on the left. That's the service area over there. And then the hotel, the elevators are here off to the left. And then the hotel would be able to go straight out for a pedestrian access to Rehoboth Avenue. Okay. This red or pinkish color, whatever you want to call it, is retail shops. Okay, so it shows that this is more or less the footprint of Grotto's as it sits today. Candy Kitchen sits here, the ice cream guy sits here, and Southman Under, who's I don't know, down the line.
Nice spice and tea shop.
John knows. I know you all know. Anyway, and the idea is that this will retail. The idea is that we want it to be a retail project. This is extremely important retail corner. We want to keep it in its
What's that?
continuity. It's obviously a big income draw.
Cool.
This plan shows the second level. Okay, so what happens here on this plan and this building is that we have a footprint that is pretty much a very big area, almost covers the entire ground.
That's one of our white whales.
But on the upper level, the building, because it's a hotel and not as wide, sets back on multiple sides.
Yep, close
it
only
has to
counts in
sit
horseshoes
back
and hand grenades.
in some regards by code, but it also just has to set back because of the width of the building. So this shows this green space is actually, this green color is actually a giant terrace, okay? And the terrace is covered by a porch sort of starting here and wrapping all the way down here. The balance of it is not covered with, we open to the sky, there's a little colonnade that runs along this edge. That's the swimming pool. This is the swimming pool seating area, and then this is what we're calling the pool terrace. And then the rest of these are guest rooms, right? And in the plan that we submitted, there's 121 guest rooms. The rooms are relatively small. They're like 250 square feet. Okay. So a typical hotel room is like 25 or 375, and a luxury product to get up to 375. Right. So what we were doing in this initial exercise is to maximize the number of rooms. And so doing, we ended up with a lot of rooms that were like 275. Right? It was our feeling in development that we wanted to do more of a luxury product or a more spacious product. So that's the difference between the plans I'll show you later on and this set of plans right here. And that is that the guest rooms have gotten larger. The area has stayed the same. And so we've gone down a number of guest rooms. We're 120, But the other key thing about this is that we have a lot of open space. You can see there's a lot of terrace space. We would like to build a conference center involved in this building. It makes sense. It makes sense for Rehoboth. It makes sense for us. It makes sense for year-round business. But we don't have the FAR to allow us. At one point early on, there was a little bit of ambiguity between Susan and the design team and Dom as to whether a meeting space would be part of included in FAR or not. Right? So we had it out there. It was great. We had a 3,000 square foot meeting space. We read it more carefully, and we said, actually, we can't have it. It does count against FAR, so we will pull it out. Right? But this is an option. You can see it's a great space for it, and we could build a really nice ballroom space there that would fit in well with the quality, the 5-star nature of the hotel, and the type of guests you can imagine. Weddings, meetings, not going to Dover for meetings, having meetings in Rehoboth. I've never been to a meeting in Dover, so don't. But apparently, people do that. This would be a great alternative. You know, there'd be no question where people would go. So, so that's what this space here shows you. It does show you there's a great opportunity on the deck of this building to build a nice ballroom type.
So we're gonna put them on TV?
Yeah. Okay.
We're putting them on TV?
So this is a typical upper
Works
level
for me.
plan. You can see we have waterfront rooms here. You have nice rooms that overlook Rehoboth.
Sell them a sponsorship on Delmarva Light.
Usually rooms that face and look over top of the retail building here, and the rest of the buildings all are sort of have great views of the water. And all the rooms do have some kind of view of the water.
I like it.
This is another level up above, 3rd and 4th level. Okay. So, just really quickly on the elevations, this is our first shot across the board on the elevations. This lower elevation is Rehoboth Avenue, and the building is designed to meet the 42-foot height limitation, and but with some portion of the roof being architecturally embellished to a percentage that meets the requirements. So some of the roof is a little taller, but that would be the sloped roof and the finial and the rest of this kind of stuff. So this shows the ground level retail. This elevation at the top is the boardwalk elevation. This big white volume over here is our neighbor's property. Okay, so that's the reason why it's not shown. We could show it to you, but it would be more ambiguous than that. That's just the little house behind. This is the one-story retail, and the little house behind it, and then our building sits to the right of it. Sorry, to the right, plan right. And this shows this covered walkway here, similar to the old Bellhaven building, and we brought it all the way down the street along Rehoboth Avenue, and in this scheme at this point, we thought maybe we could have like a semi-public staircase that would take you up. You could walk down here and go back down over here. We have taken this staircase out for obvious reasons, mostly to do with vacancies, and so, but we still would like to keep this lojo or porch, second level porch. You can see the retail has large openings. It's flexibly designed. It's very commercially friendly. But one point I would like to say is that the height limitation of 42 feet does end up limiting the height of the retail. Okay, so we have a 9-foot ceiling, 8-foot 8 ceiling. Floor to floor height is 9'4" for the guest rooms. On the top floor, the third floor has to have an extra foot in order to have the mechanical crossover and combine and go up in one place. Leaves us with about a 12-foot ceiling for the retail space. Okay, so, and you know, I was in Dallas 2 days ago, right? In a fabulous restaurant, and typically, and you know it, you can point to them various restaurants along the highway. They all have really tall ceilings, 20-foot ceilings. That's sort of the market, is 20-foot tall ceilings. 18-foot is kind of a sort of a lower limit, right? Why is that? Because people feel comfortable in those spaces. You think about your favorite new restaurants; they're all very tall and airy and light, right? Because of the height limitation in Rehoboth Beach, we will not be able to have that if we want to have it. So, in my opinion, you may consider relaxing that, just because it'll be a much nicer space. It'll make more money. It'll be a better place for tourists. It'll compete more with the highway. And not that it won't compete with the highway anyway, but spatially, those buildings, those rooms are really fantastic. With the current height limitations, we will be limited to 12 feet. Let's see. This is another elevation here. This is the rear elevation looking along. This is the building next to us, and this is looking into the parking area. The back of the building, again, is designed to look like the front of the building. It's a four-sided project. It looks good on all sides, and that's our intention. The last drawing, this is kind of a cut elevation, so I apologize, it may be a little confusing. The lower piece of this is actually the front door of the hotel, and that's the wing of the hotel that sort of faces Wilmington Avenue. Right? This space over here, this is the space that I was telling you. This is where the ballroom could be. It's basically open air here. There's a deck. There's nothing above it. There are no rooms that look out on it, and it could be an opportunity for a permanent structure, or it could be an opportunity for a temporary structure. We could put tents out there, but it would be better for, I think, the community if this had a big advantage of this airspace. This is the cut line, so this is actually, this is connected to here. This is the other side of that pavilion, and yes, we will put windows. All right, moving right along. Some images of the building as it fits into the context. This is Rehoboth Avenue, and you can see that almost, immediately this building will transform the south side of Rehoboth Avenue. And our goal is to transform it with the feeling of the way it looked 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So this shows the ground level retail here, and this shows the porch. That's the porch, and the building does set back. The height of the porch does conform with the 24-foot max height along the wall. The retail base basically conforms with the 14-foot height requirement, So the building does do all the things that it should do, but again, the porch would be counted against FAR unless we got some special exception. Another image from the sky. We built a gazebo. Next time you see this, it will really become more alive. It's just sort of beginning to do the context. This is the corner of Woodruff Avenue and the boardwalk, not unlike the image you saw previously. Again, the eave line of this building is 42 feet, right? So what's popping up behind the 42 feet is the half of this roof and these pyramids. Looking due south on